Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of The Tactical Businessman. That's right, giving you the tools, tactics, and techniques that you need to survive in today's modern world. Today's topic, solitary confinement. Dun, dun, dun. That's right, solitary confinement. The exact place where no prisoner wants to go. So, before we talk about solitary confinement, I want to talk about the process that someone goes to actually get into solitary confinement, right? So why do jails and prisons exist in the first place? They exist because someone did something that they weren't supposed to, so they're put in jails, right? Jails for usually any crime that lasts less than a year, prison for anything that lasts more than a year. And these jails restrict their movements, restrict their ability to do things, right? Restrict their ability of when to shower, restrict their ability of when to eat, restrict their ability of when to work out. Just restrict. Why? Because the idea is that if we can control them in here, they will learn that that is the behavior that they need to exhibit when they get out. Does it work? Well, let's not really debate that because that could be its own separate, series, honestly. But I want to talk about solitary confinement. So solitary confinement, for the most part, only exists in prisons, right? For inmates who are there for an extended period of time. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only place that it happens, but that is where it happens for the most part. So my police department, we had our own little jail. It was just an overnight thing. Anything longer, they'd go down to the county. But we had an overnight jail. And guess what we had? We had a padded room. What was the padded room for? The padded room was for the prisoners who weren't behaving, who couldn't be around other prisoners, didn't like the rules, were always fighting, like whatever it was, that's what they were in. And if they couldn't control themselves in there, they were restricted in their movements. They could be strapped to the chair, like handcuffed, like any of a number of things. The purpose being to control their movements, right? To make them comply. So I want to talk about solitary confinement. Solitary confinement for most prisons means 23 hours a day. An inmate is kept inside a cell, usually no bigger than 8 by 10. Most of the time, smaller than that. The cell has a bed, a sink, and a toilet, and that's pretty much it. Most of them don't even have windows. So you have a solid door, solid walls, an 8 by 10 room, and nothing else. Food is usually delivered through a slot in the door, and then, if they're lucky, the inmate will get an hour of exercise a day, which is usually in a cage. Like literally they're moved from a cage to a cage. So for most of the 20th, 21st century, solitary confinement, or a period of time that a prisoner spent in solitary confinement, was for just a few days or several weeks in extreme examples. Today they spend years in solitary confinement. Supporters, what do they say? They say it's meant to keep prisoners safe, but according to science, it takes a heavy mental toll. Now, why are we talking about solitary confinement when it comes to being a businessman? When it comes to being a husband and father? Well, you're going to find out here soon enough. Before we get to that, I want to talk about a study. So there was a study done in the 1950s at the University of Wisconsin. There was a psychologist whose name was Harry Harlow. Harry Harlow was a psychologist that put monkeys, these specific rhesus monkeys, inside this custom-built chamber, that we'll call it, right? It had slippery sides. It made it impossible for these monkeys to climb out, right? So he's doing this study, and he notes that after a day or two, the monkeys quit trying to escape, and they literally confined themselves to a corner. Some of them would wrap themselves up in a ball. Some of them would just kind of stare hopelessly. They realized, at least from their behavior, that there was no getting out. Some of these monkeys would sit there and rock themselves for long periods of time. Some would just circle around in the cage, like just walk in circles over and over and over again. Some of them even resorted to what? To mutilating themselves, to hurting themselves. So this study said that most of them were able to readjust after a short period of time, right? But those that spent 12 months or more in solitary confinement obliterated these animals socially, i.e., they were no longer able to act or react in a social environment. They had spent too much time on their own. But guess what? Monkeys weren't the only ones experimented on. 1951, there was another study at McGill University. If you go to McGill University, I'm sorry. They paid a group of male students. They paid them. You know, man, we're suckers for money. They paid them. They said, hey, we're going to put you in this small chamber. You're only going to have a bed. We're going to cover your eyes. We're going to cover your ears. And we're going to put gloves on your hands. The point being sensory deprivation, right? The initial target, the initial goal was to observe them for a period of 6 weeks. Most of them could not last more than a day or two. None of them lasted more than 7 days. 7 days, 1 week, that's it. According to the study, nearly every man who participated in the experiment lost the ability to think clearly for any length of time. One of them couldn't see anything but dogs. Like literally, that's all he saw was dogs. Another one felt the urge to pee 24 hours a day. So like he would just stand in front of the toilet thinking that he had to pee. So we talk about like, what's the effect on prisoners? Well, there have been plenty of studies that have been done, right? But I just want to point out one, right? In 1995, there was a study done on the federal prison system. 63% of the suicides that occurred in the federal prison system occurred with men who were in solitary confinement. I want to read something to you. So one of the prisoners said, being in segregation, and I'm not quoting, right? I'm paraphrasing. Being in segregation was enough to drive a man crazy, right? Because all he wanted to do was escape. And the only way that they could see to escape was death. The only way that they could see to escape was death. So why is it that we do this? Why is it that we allow these men to be put in these situations? Why is it that, are you ready for this? Why is it that we put ourselves in these situations? Oh, snap, he just said it. That's right. I just said it. Solitary confinement. As you go back and examine your life, look at the times that you have put yourself in solitary confinement. Could be in your business. Could be in your marriage. Could be with your body. Could be with God. Like, it doesn't matter. You put yourself in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement does what? It drives you batshit crazy. Just like these prisoners. Why do 63% of prisoners in solitary confinement commit suicide? The same reason why so many men outside of prison commit suicide. Because they put themselves in this place where they feel what? All alone. There's no way out. They feel restricted. They feel confined. And they see their only means of escape of being suicide. Listen. How many of you men have actually contemplated this? Like, let's get real. How many of you men have actually thought about this? Guess what? I have. There's a point of time in my life, and if you've heard my story, you would know when that is. If you haven't, I'd invite you to go back and listen to the first episode. It's called Origins. There's a point in time in my life where what? Where the only thing I thought about was isolating myself, getting away from a marriage that I didn't think was working, getting away from my kids who I felt I couldn't connect with, getting away from God because he was abandoning me, getting away from everyone and everything, and just being by myself. And I found myself alone, parking garage at work. After having finished working, I can't remember, 16 to 20 hours the night before, having been to work or needing to be to work 4 hours later, because that's just how I worked, right? I buried myself in work so I wouldn't have to think about being so alone. But here I was feeling alone in this parking garage by myself. And the only thought going through my head is, well, if I kill myself, at least my family will have some money. At that point, I think, I don't know, I had $1 million or $1.5 million in life insurance. So they would have something so that they wouldn't be alone, right? This is the logic that was going through my head. I'd put myself in solitary confinement. And just like these prisoners, what happened? My ability to think clearly went out the damn window. There was no ability to think clearly. I'd lost it all. And some of you are thinking right now, boy, I've never been there. Like, I can't imagine that. Why would he ever think that? Like, that's not a logical way to think. You're right. It's not a logical way to think. But so many of you have been in that same place, and so many of you are headed down the exact same path right now. Like, you're headed down this path where eventually you'll find yourself alone and contemplating this exact same thing. How many businessmen do you know that commit suicide? How many cops do you know that commit suicide? How many husbands and fathers do you know that commit suicide? How many women do you know that commit suicide? Like, over and over and over again. On the outside, you're looking at their lives going, wow, they really have it all. They have a successful business. They have lots of money. They have nice cars. They have a nice house. They have a wife and 2.5 kids and a dog and a cat. And yet they commit suicide. And yet they're addicted to drugs. And yet they're alcoholics. And yet they're addicted to porn. And yet they cheat on their wives. Do you want me to keep going? Because I'm talking about you. And I'm also talking about me. Like, this was me for so many years. And I didn't even realize this. Here I am arresting quote-unquote bad guys, violators of the law, putting them in jail, some of them ending up in prison with 20 to 30 year sentences. I was putting these men in a position where they could end up in solitary confinement, where at least they were restricted in their movements and their ability to think and act clearly. Yet I was doing the exact same thing to myself, putting myself in this situation. Like, couldn't find a solution to make things work in my marriage? All right, I will isolate myself. Like, there were periods of time where my wife and I would get into a fight, we'd get into an argument, a disagreement, whatever you want to call it, where I would literally not talk to her, sometimes for weeks at a time. Could you imagine being married to somebody like me? Like, and how many of you are the exact same way? Like, maybe it doesn't go weeks, but maybe it goes hours or days or whatever. Maybe some of you it is weeks. Like, we put ourselves in this solitary place. Our wives arguing with us is to wake our asses up. But what do we see it as? We see it as an attack. So we're going to do what? We're going to put ourselves in solitary confinement. Woe is me. Nobody understands me. Nobody gets me. Nobody loves me. Nobody likes me. So I'm just going to isolate myself. Children who don't listen to you, who don't do what they're told, who don't tell you they love you. Solitary confinement. You put yourself in a position where you're all alone. And you make what? Irrational decisions. Irrational decisions. And I know we're talking about suicide, but it's not just suicide. Like, think about this. You're arguing with your wife, you're arguing with the kids. What do you want to do? Spend more time at work. Why? Because then you don't have to go home and deal with it. Well, guess what? Then there's somebody else that works late. Or you find yourself at a bar. And then there's that girl. Starts innocent enough. Then you start chatting. Then you start drinking. And then you end up in some random roach motel bed, regretting some decision that you just made simply because you had isolated yourself. You'd put yourself in this position where you didn't want to deal with reality. So you literally commit suicide on your marriage. Like this happens over and over and over again. And all you men experience this. I know this because I've experienced this. And like, the worst thing that you can do is to continue to put yourself in that situation. Because the more you find yourself solitary, all alone, isolated, the more your ability to think clearly goes out the damn window. And the only thing that you can do is think of a way, what? Out. The easiest way out. The easiest way out of a bad marriage, or what you think is a bad marriage, is to cheat, or to drink, or to use drugs. How many marriages do you know end because of these things? Mine almost did. The easiest way to get out of a bad body is to eat more shit. Like, this is your logic. I hate my body. I'm going to go eat more ho-hos and donuts and pie and drink more beer. And the easiest way to get out of a bad financial situation, make more bad financial decisions. Declare bankruptcy. Keep spending money. And so we think that isolating ourselves and continuing down this path of isolation is actually going to serve us, when in the end all it does is perpetuate the problem. It makes it bigger. And just like a cancer, it just grows and grows and grows until we can't deal with it anymore. And that's where the quote-unquote suicide comes into, or the real suicide comes into the equation. All right. So we've identified this problem. Now, what in the hell do we do about it? You're a businessman who doesn't want to deal with the reality of his business because the numbers aren't right. The employees aren't doing what he wants. The business isn't headed in the right direction. So what does he do? He drinks himself to sleep every night. He goes to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking that that's somehow going to solve his problem. I'll work when no one's there. I'll isolate myself. I'll find somebody else to deal with the problem. And all the while, the business is continuing to crash and burn. See, your life and your business are parallels. So what is it that we can do? See, solitary confinement for you, unlike for a prisoner, is self-imposed. Which means what? You got the damn key. It's in your pocket. Pull it out. If your business isn't working, quit running from your business. I can't tell you how many men that I work with that have burned multi-million-dollar businesses to the ground. Burnt them to the ground. Why? Simply because, what? Simply because they didn't want to deal with it. They'd rather isolate themselves. And so their business burns to the ground, which means what? Their personal life burns to the ground. Their body burns to the ground. Their ability to have any money burns to the ground. Like, it all just burns to the ground. So what do? I talked about this a few weeks ago, right? This foundational formula for getting what you want. So let's apply it, right? Does this really work? Okay, cool. Let's go. When you don't want to deal with the truth, what do? You go to fantasy. You go to you go to Storyland, right? Pretending that everything's okay, or pretending that it'll work itself out. Pretend. When has pretending ever gotten you what you wanted? Never. So instead of pretending, instead of dealing with the feelings of woe is me, nobody gets me, nobody understands, I'd rather just be alone. Instead of dealing with these feelings, what do we need to look at? We need to look at the facts. So one of the guys I was working with, I'll use him for example. Multi-million-dollar business. Earlier this year, he was losing money. Like losing money. At the peak of his business, he was doing $400,000 in revenue, not income, but in revenue a week. He's doing 125 and just hemorrhaging money. So what does he do? He starts going to work at 2 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't work. What does he do? He goes home and he isolates himself in his home office. His wife comes in. Well, guess what? The relationship's not working too well because he's isolating himself. What does he do? He gets mad. He punches a hole in the wall. Scares his wife and kids out of the house. Like everything is crumbling, right? Until what? Until he stopped and looked at the facts. What are the facts? Here is why I'm hemorrhaging money. Because of this, this, this. Okay. So now, instead of running from the facts, like let's look at the facts. If these employees are not performing the way that they need to be performed, you have two choices. Offer them the opportunity to perform better or get rid of them and replace them. So the decision was made. It's time to get rid of what's not working, i.e. the dead branches of the tree. Get rid of them, burn them, and let's go with what's working. So this takes a couple of months to implement. But he goes through a couple of months where instead of leading with feelings, can't even talk anymore. He's leading with facts. What do the facts get him? After hemorrhaging money, a couple months later, he's now doing $500,000 plus in revenue a week. It's 200% increase. And guess what happens to his personal life? The exact same thing. He starts looking at the facts. I've been ignoring my wife. Starts taking her on weekly date nights. Starts getting her flowers. Starts listening to her more. Starts getting her what she wants. Starts putting her first. Like all of these things happen at the same time because they're all related. You can't go all in on business and not go all in on your relationship. You can't go all in on your body and not go all in on your relationship. You can't, like they're all connected. So where is he at now? Well, he's at a place where now he's got an offer to buy his business for multiple millions of dollars. Why? Because he finally quit looking at the feelings and started looking at the facts. The same thing can happen for you. You can keep isolating yourself and hoping things get better and watching everything burn to the ground and consider quote unquote suicide, either real or through some other means. Or you could say enough of my pity party. Enough of me locking myself and isolating myself away. I'm going to pull this key out. I'm going to open this damn cell and I'm going to go to work. Like everything that you want out of life is possible. Everything. But you got to have the right tools. If you got to dig a tunnel, you're going to want the biggest damn tools possible. You want to have the best tools possible. You don't want to have a fork. You don't have a spoon. It's going to make digging a tunnel damn near impossible. So apply this formula. Facts, feelings, focus, fruit. The facts, what? What are the facts right now in my business? It's not working. Why is it not working? Because of employees, or because of expenditures, or because the business model isn't right. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's time to shift it, right? Shift it and get a new target. Get a new focus. What is it that I really want? And then use the feelings that you want to get that. And eventually, guess what? You'll get the fruit. You'll hit your target. Sounds super simple, right? And it sounds really hard too. And I know this because I've experienced this. See, my life for so long, I would never look at the facts. Why was my marriage shitty? Because I ignored my wife. Because I expected her to do things for me. And guess how my marriage got better? I quit looking at the feelings. Started looking at the facts. She's been super busy. The kids have been sick. This is why the dishes aren't done. This is why there's dirty laundry everywhere. This is why my house is a mess. So yeah, I could get pissed off at her because nothing's the way I want her. I could look at the facts and be like, you know what? In order for me to get what I want, which is sex and connection, maybe I should start helping her. So listen, it doesn't matter if you're looking at your business, if you're looking at your personal life, or if you're looking at your body, like it doesn't matter. But what does matter is you are the one that put yourself in solitary confinement. So you could end up making more piss poor decisions and eventually think of committing suicide, either real or destroying your business, marriage, body, whatever. Or you call time out and be like, okay, what's not working? Why is it not working? And what can I do about it? All right, that is it for today's episode. Listen, if you want more information on how this works, if you want to know all the tools, tactics, and techniques that I employ to help businessmen get what they want out of their life, I got some for you. It's called the Tactical Business Experience. This is a super special thing. Why? Because it allows men an environment to help them get clear on where they're at in life right now, what it is that they want, and how it is that they're going to get it. But you don't have to listen to me. You listen to the men that I've coached, that I've helped, that I've guided along this process. Go to thetacticalbusinessman.com and you can hear a little bit more about my story as well as their stories and where it is that they are in life right now. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I love to have conversations with you guys. Garrett at warriorguardian.com, GERRITT at warriorguardian.com. Love to have a conversation with you. As always, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.